I believe is in my opinion, that the New Deal did nothing to reduce or kill off the Depression. Is that correct? Okay. No, that's not my position. And I'll do two further things. Number one, Roosevelt's programs did take a huge bite out of the unemployment numbers between 1933, when he was inaugurated, and 1936, when he ran for re-election. The unemployment rate comes down from 25% to 14%. 14% is still very high. Something today we would consider almost intolerable, but that was progress. The numbers were moving in the right direction. So it's simply not true that he did nothing by way of economic recovery. My point was simply that he had another, and to some degrees a competing priority, and that was to use the moment of crisis to enact a reform program that I think he had the outlines of it, at least in his head, for a long time before 1929. And he understood that it was the crisis that gave him the chance to do this, so that his, I'm going to overstate the case here, but his incentive to end the Depression in a hurry was not that strong, because he knew that was the facilitating, enabling circumstance that allowed him to put the reform program through. If you go through just a short list of the things that endure today, still last, the institutional changes from that period: Social Security, FHA, SEC, National Labor Relations Act, changes in the Federal Reserve System. They all date from 1935. So if miraculously he put the economy back onto a business as usual basis as of the end of 1933, then it's a very nice question whether we ever would have had those reforms that came from a later date. And I'll add a footnote to this. When Barack Obama was inaugurated, after he was inaugurated, about a month then, so it's in February of 2009, he made an appearance on the Lehrer NewsHour on PBS. And Jim Lehrer was interviewing him. And again, I can't do this from memory, but I'll get it pretty close. Lehrer went through a list of issues that were on the agenda: war in Iraq, war in Afghanistan. We were shedding jobs at the rate of 700,000 a month. The banking system on the brink of collapse. On and on and on. And Lehrer, he went through this list and he said to Obama, "Isn't your plate too full?" And Obama gave the most interesting response. He said, "No." He said, "This is when you want to be president, because this is when things come loose and you can get people to focus on the national priority list long term, and you can really make things happen. So this is the moment you want." Same idea. Crisis is opportunity. Rahm Emanuel, after the November 2008 election, said, he kind of summed this up, and some of you might remember, he said, "You never want a crisis to go to waste." He was, Obama's chief of staff, incoming chief of staff. Same idea. We have a political system in this country that is purpose-built, designed in the 18th century to be very difficult to move. We all learned about it in school. We studied checks and balances. What's that all about but constraining the exercise of power from the center? It's the kind of system we have. It's in our political DNA. We're wary of that, and we arrange things so that it's very difficult. And the moments when you can really affect major history curve bending change in our society are very, very few. And it takes a crisis, some big disruption, to do it.
Let me follow on to Carl's question. He talked about the psychological impact, and you made an excellent argument on the quantitative effects of the New Deal, and that they were not that great in turning the Depression. But how about the New Deal as symbolism, as a symbol of something that we're doing to solve the problem? And much the same as what we have today with President Obama. It's the symbolic nature that's just as important, and to me, maybe more important than the actual effects of the legislation.
Yeah, thank you. If I had my wits about me, I would have made the point myself. So thanks for the opportunity to do it. Yeah, I think if I put it this way, the New Deal Depression experience shifted the schedule of political values in our society, and to a significant degree legitimated the idea that government does have an active and positive role to play in our collective life. And again, it's in the numbers. I showed the numbers this morning. Government is just a much bigger presence than it used to be. However, that still remains controversial in our society.
It's a mouse. They're not being naughty. They're being attentive.
Just stand up on your chair.
The thing that I find so curious is, do any politicians ever have historians or as their advisors? Because it's more or less, you're seeing a repeat of issues in regards to the same questions that arise in 1930 that we're presently dealing with now. And you would think that, like you often hear say that the world is like a stage and the actors are just different. The same thing is going on. And you constantly see these debates or issues about government involvement. How much government should be involved? What should they do? What they should not do? The issue of universal health care, as stated, is so blown out of proportion, but yet it still is something that you can go back as far as, I think even Truman tried to follow up to some degree with dealing with some form of universal health care. Do these individuals ever take the opportunity to look at the history and see that this is just a re-engagement of things that have already transpired? What did work and what did not work?
You know, I have a couple of answers to that. Some are more serious than others. You know, one is there are some occasions in which presidents have actually brought historians into their sort of inner sanctum as advisors, and there's at least one case in which a professional historian became a president, and our record is not very good. Woodrow Wilson. Yeah, Arthur Meyer Schlesinger, who David referenced as one of the main exponents of the kind of progressive theory of American history, and particularly in regard to the New Deal, became an advisor to John F. Kennedy, had been his teacher at Harvard, and then was sort of drawn into the White House as one newspaper put it, he was going to be Aristotle to Kennedy's Alexander the Great. It wasn't a little over dramatic.
Eric Goldman Johnson.
Yep. And Taylor Branch hung around the Clinton White House a lot too, although I think he mostly listened to the president whine.
And still alone, but George Bush had a series of seminars.
And this guy has actually been to actually the White House to be one of those consultants, so maybe we can give him a drink and hear some of those stories. But take more than one. But what I was going to say is, I mean, in fact, I'd like to throw this out as a kind of broader question and ask these guys to meditate on it a little bit. It's axiomatic to historians. I mean, we just, you know, you learn this in graduate school and you get it pounded into your head, and this was one of my teachers who pounded it, that every historical circumstance is by definition distinctive, unique. You know, this notion that history repeats itself is insane. It simply doesn't. You know, you can't step into the same river twice, and the particular, you know, confluence of infinite numbers of circumstances and contingencies just means that it's never quite so simple. And yet all of us believe, I think, and I think certainly professional historians believe, but I think most people casually believe, that history should inform how we think about politics. And we see all of the time episodes that put us in mind of something historical, or where we think that thinking historically would shed light on a particular issue. It's been referenced here, for example, you know, one of the big debates has been, was the shrinking of the stimulus here, you know, the original Obama stimulus, and then the kind of retracting it, was that repeating the mistake that Roosevelt had made in 1937? You know, we could go on and on with this. And I guess I'd just like to invite you guys to think a little bit about this. You know, you are both students of a period of enormous upheaval, a period which provoked severe political debate about the role of the federal government, which gave rise to new forms of political demagoguery, in which new media were fundamentally changing the way in which political leaders could communicate with the populace. So just prima facie, we have an awful lot of things about the period you guys study that put us in mind of this period that we're living through now. And so why don't I invite you guys to think a little bit about, what do you take from that, or what do you see in our world today by virtue of what you know about the past?
Well, a phrase that's circulated a lot in recent years to exactly this point is that